feel
So in
like
other words, when you say you can do things quicker with two cars, it'd be like turning the speedboat versus turning the Queen Mary, so to speak.
Yeah, I think so, because we don't have such a big assembly line and production line and 600 people. We got 45, 50 people are working on the Cup team. And so if we want to say, hey, we want to do this differently, we just have a shop meeting on Tuesday morning at 6:30 and say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. It doesn't take meetings on meetings and meetings and production and managers and people. We just say, all right, this is how we're going to build it. So I think that part you can react a little bit quicker. But if you ask me, would I rather have a lot of people and a lot of resources or be small? I'd rather have a lot of people and a lot of resources, and let us try and see what we could do with them. Yeah.
to that point, I think fans will still look at Front Row and yourself as an underdog in this playoffs.
Yeah.
Do you feel that? And does that influence your mindset at all as you approach these 10 races?
No, and I don't know why I don't feel that way. Like, on the outside, I understand why people are like, oh, if I'm going to pick a guy that's fallen out the first round, it's going to be the 34. So I'm not mad at y'all for saying that. It doesn't offend me. But when I look at it, I'm like, I don't think so. I think we are going to be able to advance and to move on. And so why I have that confidence, I have my own reasons just based on speed and performance, and I know the nuances of, did we miss it this week or hit it this week? And, the first Darlington Spring, we missed it a little bit. But I know what we had last year, and we ran top 10 both races last year. We tried something different that first Darlington, didn't work out. So I have confidence going back because I know we have a pretty proven package that has run well there before. So I look at it differently. As far as I just feel like we got to do what we've been doing and we'll be okay. I don't think we have to crush it.
To that point, you've had really a career season this year and last. So where you were mentally a year ago with as draining as it was as everyone departed to where you are today at Playoff Media Day, what has this last year been like from your perspective as you get back to this point?
It's still mentally draining. There's still a lot going on. But yeah, I sort of like the chaos. But I'm not feeling a lot of angst towards this weekend. I'm just more working on all the little things that I have to work on to make sure that I execute this weekend coming up. And the one thing that I think has helped me is I'm not thinking about Kansas. I haven't thought one thought about Kansas. I'm thinking about Darlington. And when Darlington's done, I'm going to focus on Kansas. And when Kansas is done, I'm going to focus on Bristol. And I'm just staying laser focused 1 week at a time, 1 lap at a time, 1 stage at a time, and just make the most of it.
Has that been your whole approach throughout the regular season, where it was week to week? Or
week to week, for sure, yeah. And it helps you, too. It helps you move on quickly, right? Because a lot of times you can get in that funk where you have 2 bad weeks and it just hasn't gone well, and you just stay in that. But if you just, that's over. We're moving on to next week and kind of shut the door and reset. I think it's important. This is a tough mental sport. I mean, it really is. So I think everybody has a different process of how they go about that.
Well, how do you have a week like Indianapolis and not have a week like the Glen?
Yeah, well.
Right, like that's probably why we pick you to miss. Because you're like, well, they did it in Indianapolis, but get to a place like the Glen, and are they going to make that mistake or just not have it?
Yeah, no, that's great, and it's fair. And as much as I want to let that hurt my feelings, Bob, it doesn't hurt my feelings. And I'll tell you why, is we had speed to win that race. And we haven't always had speed to win races, right? And so this is a new thing for us. And so the mistake that I made on pit road, I know why it happened. I know what happened. I can fix that. It doesn't make me nervous about being able to execute. It was just a mistake that I can recognize really easy. Pit crew stuff, same. It just jumped off the wall, too soon. It happens to a lot of teams. I think the positive side of that is with 2 penalties, we were still going to run top 10. And we had an engine failure there and nothing we could do about it. That's not in our control. That's not a variable that we can control. Roush Yates Engine Shop has very, very, very few engine failures. I've been there a long time. I think I've only had 2 or 3. And so it's just a fluke deal where, yes, we didn't execute. Yes, we gave up a win or a potential chance at a win, but we're still going to manage the top 10 out of it because we had the speed. And so we just have to bring the speed and not make any mistakes, but it doesn't make me nervous.
Over these past couple of years, running more consistently inside the top 15, have you learned anything either about yourself as a driver or your competitors as you're racing around them to pick up on tendencies that either they or you are
for sure.
displaying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a student of the sport. I study a lot of data and study a lot of in-car footage, and I'm not studying it to see what they're doing with the gas and the brake. I'm studying to see how they mentally process what they're doing and learning of what makes them make the decisions that they make. Now, I don't know. I'm just looking at it from my view. And so I think I have a fairly good idea of what people are going to do and how they're going to respond and decisions that they're going to make based on studying a lot.
Do you look at odds going into the championships? I mean, if you break down the odds of the 16 drivers right now, it's like you're at the bottom of the list. But does that matter to you?
No, I don't look at odds, not because I'm not a numbers guy. I'm not a betting guy. Like, I've never gambled. So I don't know how sports odds work. Like, I don't know the algorithm that does it. But I would imagine the odds weren't very high of us winning Indy, right? So odds are meant to be broken, right? As far as all that stuff goes. And so I don't look at them, but they're quite interesting. And I don't know how they compute them. You know, what I look at is, like, for me, when I'm looking at stuff, let's just take before the playoffs. I looked at Michigan. I looked at I'm trying to think what was just before Michigan, Richmond, those places, and I looked at, okay, Bubba is probably going to Pocono, Richmond, Michigan. Bubba's going to have a shot at the pole at Pocono, probably going to run top 5. He's going to have a shot at the pole at Michigan, probably going to run top 5. I don't know what the odds were of that, but I just look at statistically where he's at, where his teams are at, where the Toyotas are at, how they're performing, their speed. Knew he was going to score a lot of points at those, right? And so I don't know if that's how they do the odds or not, but then I looked at the road courses, and I looked at Daytona, and I looked at the races that were beyond that, and I'm like, well, we're going to finish in the top 4 or 5 of every stage, so we're going to score these points. We'll be able to finish in the top 5 in the race, and so I need to be within 20 points of Bubba going into this. Like, so I don't know if those are odds, but that's kind of how I look at it, is based on historical performance, but based on where their team's at currently and where they've been strong. And I think it's moving in our sport. It's not, you can't just say, oh, I mean, we used to say Martin Truex wasn't good at short tracks, right? And then he wins a few Martinsvilles, he wins all the short tracks, and we're like, well, how could you bet against him, right? So I just don't know if odds do it justice, but you just pay attention to what teams and drivers, and momentum's big in the sport too, right? Like, you wouldn't bet against Chris Buescher right now. It's momentum's on his side, but statistically you might. So yeah.
Well, real quick, your odds at Indy, I think, were 18 to 22 to 1, depending on which sports book.
Yeah.
You went to 4 to 1 for the following week.
Oh, good. Okay. All right.
At Watkins
So
Glen.
it moves quickly.
It moved quickly.
Okay, gotcha.
So,
yeah, I gotcha.
You've been in front row a while. What's the biggest change you've seen with that organization?
Mindset and people. I mean, you got to have great people to do what we're doing right now, and you got to have the right mindset. And I think that we've shifted the mindset, and it took shifting some people to do that. And then it was also having some of the people that we had just embrace that new mindset, and that's helped a tremendous amount.
And that mindset compared with good results, does that help bring in even better people and so forth?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, just like anything, it just grows and gains momentum, and everything gets a little bit better, right? The culture, the atmosphere, the sponsorship, the funding, all those things get better as you perform better. And so it just has a very organic feel to how it just gets better and better and better and better. But it's taken us a while to get there.
Michael, I know that.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I
Go.
Yeah.
I know you guys are competitors, but is there some part of you that wants Kevin Harvick to go out on a high note in his final season, final playoffs?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It is hard. You're right. That is a hard thing, because when you're in the car, you don't think about that stuff. You know, at the end of that Daytona race, I wasn't scoping out who was up front, and man, it'd be cool to see them win. You're not thinking like that, but I think that when you're in the sport and you're ingrained in it, you still have, you know what cool moments are, and you know what special moments are. And so, yeah, you want to see a guy like that has had such an awesome career, at times been dominant, and it's unfortunate that this year the organization just has been a little down on speed, because he's actually been executing really well, and they've been running well in comparison to their other cars. So, but at the same time, I wouldn't count them out when it comes to the playoffs, right? For whatever reason, well, I know what the reason is, but they have the ability to dig deep and to figure it out, and I'm sure they will figure it out in the playoffs here.
Yeah. You've been around the sport a long time, obviously. How would you kind of sum up his legacy in the sport if you can?
Yeah, I'm probably bad about answering stuff like that, because when I think about legacy, I don't think about race wins and all that. I think about
That's what I want to know. Like,
Yeah.
non-race win stuff.
Yeah. So he's done a lot to move the sport forward. He's been vocal. He's been controversial. He's done a lot of things that I feel like have helped move the sport forward and along. And I think that, what I'll remember the last 4 or 5 years is how hard he's pushed and pushed back to make sure that things are getting done to make racing safer and our race cars safer. And also just watching him, for me, from the outside in, like, really change as a person and overall demeanor with family and kids. And he's gone more into the shepherding role with a lot of the drivers and really with some of the sport. Where the early days, he was kind of, for me, he was kind of like a guy that was unapproachable because he was so full of fire. And but yeah, seeing the other side has been neat.
Have you shared any personal moments between you two this year, maybe in the last 5 years, as you said, that encapsulates what you just said about him kind of being more of a shepherd?
I think just more, not necessarily personal one-on-one, but just seeing him with the driver council and with the guys that he represents and the younger guys, and just trying to push the sport in a good direction in all areas. One-on-one stuff, I don't really think that there's anything that stands out to me, but more of just what he's done overall.
You mentioned the 17 car earlier.
Yeah.
Like, no one's sleeping on him anymore.
Yeah.
6 weeks ago, I think people were still
Probably.
kind of counting him out. Right?
Yeah.
He would probably have been in this underdog conversation.
Yeah.
Right? So, how quick is it that a team can catch fire and change the whole narrative of their season?
If you ask the teams, it takes a really long time, because everybody from the outside in looks like they caught fire, right? But when you run 10th every week, you're close to catching fire, right? I mean, that's where our sport's at. And so you might run 10th, 11th, 12th, and everyone's like, oh yeah, they're having an okay season, but they're not crushing it, right? And then all of a sudden they find 1 or 2 things and now they're winning. And that's how tight and how close it is. And so just like we felt, I'm sure they felt like they were on the brink of being at this level. I don't think they're surprised by it. And so, yeah, I think it's so tight up front that it only takes a few things to make that next little increment, step to being able to win races.